Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host, Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's up, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I am Daniel Chamberlain. That is Kenny Simpson. We're joined today by, is it two-time state champ now, Coach?
No, just one. Just one for now. No, it's one for now. I wish.
Well, I mean, there's no shame in that game. Having a ring is not easy to do. So, one-time state champ, defensive coordinator, and associate head coach now.
Yes, sir.
Titles are getting big. Tyler Manis.
Yes, sir.
How's it going, man?
Good. Talking about titles, I'm actually trying to bring on. He was my co-DC last year, and I was like, "Have you seen the new next Rex Ryan? Title he got at USC, associate head coach for the defense. That's a new one. That's one I'm going to steal. I'm going to start using that one. It's a good title.
It's kind of like The Office, kind of like Dwight Schrute, where he's assistant to the regional manager.
Right.
Start doing stuff like that. It's just, I assume, I don't know how it really goes. I assume that's a way to get them extra money because I know, like in the high school world, if you can title it something different, you can give them another stipend. Like the associate to the head coach, bus driver, gets, there's a guy that calls roll, but you get him a $500 stipend, or like associate to the huddle coordinator, you get another whatever it is. So
I love it.
That's I mean, I guess whatever you can do to help people out, get more people on staff. That's what we need, right?
Whatever you get more money to those coaches. That's been big for me. Is how can I get more money to my coaches? So that means throwing a title and it's an extra $5,000 or whatever it is, and and Tyler, you definitely earned it. I got to hear Tyler speak on the cruise clinic we just did. So we were talking a lot better when it's warmer weather and we were wearing tropical shirts and stuff. But he's definitely earned is impressive. I'm excited to have him on here, and I think we're doing something a little different today, so it's going to be fun. We're going to try to match wits, kind of quote unquote, and I'm excited to hear Tyler talk. It was very impressive hearing him just go over what he was doing defensively this past weekend.
Well, Coach Manis, if you don't mind, just give us your elevator speech, who you are, where you're at, kind of how you got there, and then we'll jump into the show.
Okay, yeah, to fly through it. So originally from Fort Myers, Florida, which is Southwest Florida, if any of you guys know where that's at. Coached at my alma mater, was a defense coordinator the first year I ever started coaching, just because really no one wanted to coach there. They were, I think, 0-10, had given up 48 points per game. I knew the head coach a little bit. They just, they were asking for anyone to coach. So was there for 2 years. Ended up, the second year, bringing it down to 13 points per game, and we set the shutout record, best season in school history, all that jazz. Later that year, ended up getting married. We decided to move to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she was. Took a job at Tyner Academy, which is an inner city school. It was a 2A school, so it's around 60 or 70 kids on the roster, whereas SOCA, we had between 23 and 35, smaller roster. Was lucky enough and blessed enough to win a state championship at Tyner in 2022. And then kind of climbed the ladder, went to Cleveland High School, which is a city school just outside of Chattanooga. That's a 6A school and probably the hardest region in the state of Tennessee, with teams like Maryville that have won 15 of the last 20 state championships and things like that. Along with that came with, a larger roster, larger budget, pretty much all the support in the world you can get. So kind of, perfect gig. And then just recently, I'm going back to Tyner, kind of a quality of life move. We're expecting our second kiddo, so we'll have 2 kids underneath 14 months old. So kind of going back home to with my guys. So it'll be, kind of survival mode here for the next 12 months, but we're excited about that, blessed about that. So yeah, that's kind of a real quick snapshot of kind of my career. I think most guys probably know me from Twitter. A lot of guys call me the Twitter guru or anything like that. I'm not a guru. Just been lucky enough. A lot of times I think it's just the funny tweets. I make fun of offensive coordinators. Love doing that. So it's typically how I get those followers. So,
well, good luck to you in your endeavors with 2 kids under 14 months old. That's going to be fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your wife's going to hate you this football season, huh?
Oh, yeah. No, it'll be, I think the due date's in July or something like that, July 11th. So it'll be right before football season. Yeah, it'll be a grind there in August. but she's great. She's the perfect teammate. So, and Kenny met my wife and little baby on the cruise, and our baby is honestly a rock star. She's great. So I've been blessed, and it'll be interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, he had the little one. We're at some show, ice show or something. And man, he's sweet little baby, and we're talking. And so they leave. They gotta go put the baby to bed. And my wife goes, "Yeah, they're expecting another one." I went, "Already? Like that's gonna be interesting, man." And I look, it's gonna be cool when they're older, but golly, it's gonna suck when they're young. I'm sure you have heard that. I don't tell too much, but you're gonna like it when they're older.
We separated ours by almost 4 years, which in football coaching world means my kids will never play together. As one graduates, the other one will be an incoming freshman. But I'll get 8 years, hopefully, of coaching my kids. So there's strategy to it, I suppose.
There you go. Love it.
All right, guys. Well, we'll get into conversation here. Before we do, Coach Simpson, please tell us how we can simplify football for our staff and for our players.
What's up, coaches?
I want to talk to you for just a few moments about your program. The longer I'm in this profession, the more I understand that efficiency is truly the name of the game. You're talking offense, defense, doesn't matter, right? Eventually, you're going to come down to checking out your efficiency. So I have to ask you, are you doing everything in your program the most efficient way, right? Are you fundraising the most efficient way? Are you representing your players and your program to the public in the best way? Are you planning to build the facilities the most efficient way? If you answered no to any of those, or really even if you answered yes to all of them, and you haven't contacted Mark Bridges at Ace Sports, you're missing a key step. So look, Mark and his team, they are the go-to group for video board and scoreboard installations for your school. They're not just football either. Mark can help you mock up your newest video board for that new stadium, or maybe even your old stadium, right? That's where Mark and the guys come in. And we're not just buying a flashy thing, right? Yes, it's nice. It's pretty neat to have that big scoreboard, that big video board, but you're also, you're investing back into that program. You're investing into that newest fundraiser. Sure, you can keep selling your discount cards, your beef jerky, hosting pie auctions, whatever it is that you like to do. But let's just be honest with ourselves, guys. We're not making enough money for those big ticket items. For the big ticket items like turf, an indoor facility, that's where you need a big ticket item fundraiser. That's what Ace Sports is offering you today. Guys, I've talked to Mark several times now, right? And it always comes down to big school, small school. Right? Well, of course, the big schools can afford that new video board, but the small schools really can't. It's just not true anymore, man. Your school isn't too small, and I promise. Okay, 1A, 2A schools, it doesn't matter. Mark and the guys, they're helping them out. Contact Mark today at mark.bridges@acesports.com and let him come give you a quote. Let him show you and your administration the plan. Not really, it's the cheat code, right? Let him show you the cheat code that is fundraising with Ace Sports video boards. Tell him Daniel sent you. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Del Basquet's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Del in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com.
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs, with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense, and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
Appreciate that, Coach. All good things. First of all, let's talk about that big boat. So y'all just got off the cruise. I know that signups are coming back around now. Is it open now?
Yeah, it's open now. Yeah, my mom's a travel agent. Like, people ask, how do you do all this stuff? And they start to realize, like Tyler probably did, like, I don't really do much. My mom kind of handles the sign up for the cruise. My wife handles the women's part of it. So it's by far my favorite clinic you'll ever go to, because we think it's a good clinic. I had Tyler speak, Adam Harvey spoke, Marcus Hammond spoke. We had some really, really good speakers on the clinic. And then the wives have optional sessions. If they've got a little one like Tyler's wife did, she may not want to go to all the sessions, but she might want to go to 1 or 2 of them. And then the best part of it, of course, you're on a cruise ship. So we go in the morning early, knock it out, and then enjoy just enjoy the ship, enjoy where we're going. And to me, it's kind of a dual purpose thing. Obviously, you're going to learn football, but the more important thing is, especially for guys like Tyler, you got two little kids coming or one little kid, chance to go on a cruise. Kids 2 through 17, I believe, are free. So if you're listening to this and you got a bunch of kids, free trip for them. So it's going to be kind of a cool deal. Excited about next year. We will limit it. We capped it this year at 50, and we're looking at probably doing the same. We sold out by March, I think. So if you're interested in going, I think I'll get information over at my website or hit me up or even hit up Tyler. He can tell you about it, and kind of get going.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know we've done one cruise in our life, and it's wonderful way to kind of see the world and get out and meet people. So excellent networking opportunity as well.
Right.
Now that we're talking clinics, which ones are coming up? So this comes out basically the middle of February.
Okay.
What are we looking at for clinics that are left at that time?
Okay, so you got Alabama coming up into February. That one's starting to fill up pretty quickly. Shocker, Alabama football clinic is going to be pretty full. Ohio is coming up. That one's filling up as well. I'm excited to speak out at Ohio. And then later in April, I got Daniel and a couple other guys roped into joining me in Boston. And then we're going to do one in Milwaukee. And then in between those, or maybe sometime in late March, we have right in southern Washington, in La Center, Washington. So right north of Portland, south of Seattle. So my West Coast guys have an opportunity to come to that one. So going to be a lot of fun at those clinics. If you can't go to one of them, we do offer virtual. So you just hit me up and you can get all the recordings. So if you want to stay at home and kind of do that thing, that's an option also. I think you're muted, Daniel.
Muted myself. We're very excited about Boston. I think that's going to be a ton of fun. Also going to try to get up that Milwaukee, get up into the. I don't know why I want to go back to more cold. I mean, Oklahoma is pretty chilly right now, but
yeah, I think down the road I may have Tyler come and do one of these. I really enjoyed having him and Adam sit through one of my sessions, and I almost was like, man, I'd love to do a chalk, like get on there and see what these guys would do. So Tyler, be ready. I might be hitting you up to come do one of these next year and do some defensive stuff. How to stop all this, because guys want to hear that too.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. We also have the new book coming out. Tell us about that, Kenny.
Yeah, so Playmaker's Guide is coming out. It might be out on Amazon right now, probably over on my website by the time this podcast comes out. Basically, it's not a gun tee. It's more of an offensive, how to set the table, how to set up an offensive system. And then the second part of the book goes about how to actually call plays in game. Like how do you take all this information we have swirling around and then make it work? And so excited about it. It's called the Play Caller's Guide.
Awesome. Headsets. Has headsets started yet? How are we doing on headsets?
Done well. It's done well. We got a ton of articles that went out in the January issue. And then, of course, February is coming up soon. That's all free, all over at fbcoachsimpson.com.
Yeah, if you want to be if you want to write in that, which one, it looks good on a resume, but more than anything, I think it's great to put what you believe, your philosophy on whatever you want to write about. It can be power, it can be spread offense, it can be handling problem children. I don't know, but once you write it down, I feel like it really does solidify and help you even problem solve your own stuff. Right, punch holes in your own philosophy. So it's a great way to kind of master what your beliefs are in football. Write an article and teach other people at the same time. Let's jump into the questions here. So we're going to have a little fun today, since we've got a guy on here that's good at the defensive stuff, and then of course Coach Simpson being kind of an offensive guy. We want to compare a couple things, and so right now, what's really big in football, especially in the social media world, is keep it simple. Right, everything has to be simple. Don't over install. Don't overload your players. And so it's not necessarily we believe any one way is better than the other, but that's the way that I've been taught to operate. And Tyler is coming in with a system that does exactly that. It gives them a whole bunch of tools in the toolbox. It could probably be deemed overloading kids by some coaches, right? So we're really excited to just look at the differences there. And I don't believe either program comes out looking like they're correct today or they're more correct, but it's just looking at different ways you can do football. There's no one way, right? If there was the perfect way, we would all just do that and we would go on with life, and whoever had the best kids could just win. But that's just not how it works. So we're going to jump right in 2 feet here. We're going to compare that keep it simple method versus kind of what I call carrying a big toolbox. So, Kenny, I'm going to start with you here just to explain kind of this keep it simple method. Like, what does that mean when you're saying, hey, don't overdo it for the kids, keep a small system? What does that mean to you? What's the philosophy there?
Yeah, and for you guys who are listening to this, you know that like that's not exactly my belief. I probably am more in line with Tyler, but he drew he gets to argue the fun part, and I got to argue the old school part of keep it simple. So we're going to kind of make this kind of role play type deal. But for me, the idea of keep it simple, and there is value in this, 100% value in this, is basically if you can't block and you can't tackle, you're going to suck. So if you're not investing lots of time getting good at fundamentals of football, all this scheme you want to put in is worthless. We've and I've seen this. I've coached this. Unfortunately, I've been to the point where I thought scheme overrode fundamentals. We were not very good. Like we ran 35 concepts passing the ball, and we were very multiple on defense, but we neglected the fundamentals of football, which are always true. Passing the ball, catching the ball, running good routes, understanding how to block, understanding how to make reads at quarterback. That stuff will carry into if you want to add later, that's fine. But you need, in my opinion, especially the point we're arguing here, being simple allows you to be really, really good at what you do. And specifically, since we're doing defense with Tyler, being really good on defense a lot of times is, to me, understanding how to read blocks, understanding how to destroy blocks, understanding how to tackle, understanding leverage. If we give them too much, if we do too many things, we're going to suck at everything instead of being really good. And I kind of go back to Tampa Bay. A long time ago, Tampa Bay ran the Tampa 2. That was their defense. They were in a 4-3 Tampa 2. It didn't matter what you came out in. That's what they were going to do. Team won the Super Bowl. So you can win with the idea of we're going to sit in a 3-4 palms coverage, or we're going to sit in a 4-2-5, or we're going to sit in a 4-3, or we're going to sit in a 3-3, or whatever that is. We're going to sit in this defense. We're going to be great at our base, and we're going to be to the point where our kids are very good at what they're doing. The argument would be if we ask them to learn all these stunts, learn all these exotic whatever, we're going to be spending so much time learning this that we're not going to be really good at our home, our base. As an offensive play caller, my entire goal is to make you play base. And so if you're not good at your base, you're really going to struggle. So that's the point I'll be arguing. Tyler's going to I'll flip it over to him. He's going to argue the other point of that. So I'll be quiet and let you go, Tyler.
All right, Tyler, fill us in, man. So as you carry this big toolbox or have a big system, however you word that, the opposite of keep it simple. My defense coordinator and mentor growing up, Kenny Ridley, always just said, whatever you expect kids to learn, they will learn, regardless of what your system looks like. So, kind of, what is the philosophy there? What's your mentality when you're going into to install this bigger system?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because it's something that we're working through as a staff right now, coming into the first year at a new program. So, that's always the first conversation you have of is what are you going to carry? What are you not going to carry? And for, a phrase that a lot of people use, and I didn't coin this, I stole this from someone else, is, the acronym KILL, keep it likable and learnable instead of KISS. So, I love that. I think one part of it, I think you were spot on, Daniel. Kids learn whatever you expect them to learn. So, day one, I always tell my guys, day one install for us is as complicated as possible. I want the kids to know from day one that it's not anything like they've ever done before at any other, with any other staff or any other program. This is, going to be difficult. I want the kids to know it's going to be difficult. I want the kids to know that this is going to be quote unquote college level scheme and technique. So, from day one, we just try to give them as much as possible just to kind of shock them, shark attack them on that day one, and then we kind of pare it back. But I want them to know that they can't just, get by just going to practice and turning their brain off, and that they're going to, learn the scheme. I tell kids all the time, you will fall behind. Like if you miss a couple of practices, you will fall behind. There's things that we can do to get you caught up. But if you're not locked in and you're not doing the work and sometimes even extra work to get prepared, you're going to struggle. That is what it is. I think there's obviously a balance there as well. Between keeping it simple and doing a lot. I think a lot of it depends on your staff strengths. So one year you might have a guy who coached college football on the defensive line and he can do a lot. At another place, you might have, a freshman coach that, you're at a small program and you're just trying to get by. I've been there. Like I said, at SFC, it was pretty much just, my head coach and I, and we had dads everywhere else. So, the position that I coached, I could do a lot, but some other positions you might not be able to do a lot. Something else you have to ask yourself is, based off the opponents that you have to beat. That's something we talk about every offseason. Who are the opponents that we have to beat? Obviously, that's teams in your region, maybe playoff teams that you're going to see. That's something that we're looking at. A lot of times, if you just prepare to beat the best team on your schedule, that's going to be enough to beat the rest of the teams on your schedule. Now, obviously, a scheme comes into that. So, like for us, a lot of times the best thing that we're going to see in a 15-game season, including the state championship, which is stuff that we look at, is going to be a spread team. Specifically, it's going to be a team where the quarterback is a freshman. He just won Max Freshman of the Year. He threw for like 38 touchdowns and 1 interception. Right. So we're going to see that spread team down the line at some point. But the 4 games before that, it's probably going to be 11 and 12 personal gap scheme. So you have to carry tools, obviously. To get yourself to be successful at that point as well. So that's, all those things come into play when it comes to building a system. But I think if you just fall back to like, what's the best team that we could see? And that may be, state championship. That might be, winning a region. That might be a rivalry game. That was a lot of it for us at Cleveland. We hadn't beat a rival in 14 years or something like that. So a lot of it was, what can we do to beat Bradley? So a lot of all that, kind of factors into the conversation of doing a lot. I always err to doing a lot because I think it's good to push yourself. It's good to push your staff. It's good to push the kids. I've never regretted installing something. Now I have regretted not calling something, and that's on me as a play caller. But as far as installing something, I've never been, man, I wish we didn't install that. I've never felt that way. If anything, I felt the opposite way. Man, I wish I had that tool. Now calling the game, it's a completely separate conversation, in my opinion.
No, that's a great way to look at it. I've never heard that, and it looks like it came from some pretty high up people. But this keep it likable and learnable. That's a good one. And I do appreciate that there is a counterpoint out there to keep it simple, right? Because it's just not the way. I think on the offense, I've gotten to where I'm tag happy. I want to tag stuff. I want to tag. You can have 3 or 4 or 5 tags per play. It doesn't matter because on that side of the ball, I've made it modular, and I know that like different kids can learn 5 tags. And now I have 25 tags at any given, right, per each group. And that seems like a lot, but it's really not for the kids. They just know 5 tags. So I guess defensively, if I could learn to modularize defense, that would be the way, right? And then is that kind of how you do it, Coach?
Yeah. So, Kenny knows this because I just did a talk on creating a pressure system, and that's exactly what we do. I think, Coach Harvey, shout out to Coach Harvey, love that guy. He said in his talk, I want to call defense like people call offense. And I think that's what we try to do. I think it's, people call it TCU verbiage. It's kind of like West Coast offense to where we're going to have a million tags. I'm going to try to really honestly tell each individual position what to do in a specific snap, if I can do that. Some guys, they like to call one defense, and they like to let their kids check, and they like their kids to call a coverage. There's a way to be successful doing that. I am probably way too OCD to do that. I would never forgive myself if we were playing a state championship game and, we got bunched and we had 5 different bunch checks and the kids picked the wrong bunch check and, we got scored on to lose a game or something like that. That would drive me nuts. But as far as putting in a lot, we try to tag it kind of like West Coast offense. So, we're going to do, and a lot of people triple call it. So they'll do front pressure coverage. For us, we go as far as to tag the pressure, whether they're on or off. So we're always going to have an on or off tag. Whereas a lot of people will have that built in, obviously, into their coverage. Same thing with front, same thing with stunts. So we have 3 different signal callers. So, their specific position group will look at their coach to get that call. The only person that'll get the full call will be the linebacker coach because obviously they have to know front and back what's going on. But, we kind of disassociate the front to the back, and obviously the big, kicker with that is tempo. What are you going to do? Our week 1 opponent's going to be a tempo team. The team I talked about that we probably, if we make it all the way, is also a tempo team. If you do that, there you can carry a NASCAR package. You can try to shorten all your verbiage down to a word or 2. You can do wristbands. You can do signs. There's things you can do to alleviate that as long as in the off season you understand that you're going to see that and you kind of prepare for that going into it.
Yeah, for sure. Having a plan, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into the second part here. So, Kenny, Well, we'll start with Tyler here. We want to talk about all these stunts and fronts and stuff. So let's just work front to back. I think that's the easiest way. And let's just talk about a whole bunch of these stunts, right? So how are you installing these? And then Kenny, I want you to kind of tear that apart because we know offense. And so if you get this guy that's trying to use all this stuff and see if we can't just counter these up, maybe this goes as smoothly as we hope it will, and maybe it gets choppy and we got to restructure here on the fly, but we'll figure something out. So, Tyler, you kind of just talk now about keeping that modular and disassociated front and back, and that's what we've done offensively, right? We did the same thing. Let old linemen run 5 plays. Everybody else has got chaos. So, kind of walk us through what some of these D linemen are doing. What are some of these stunts that you kind of favor? And I understand that this is really hard to do because we're not game planning a single opponent. So, but just kind of what are the favorites that you continuously go back to?
Yeah, I think this is kind of kind of a little bit off topic, but it's not. I think when it comes to D-line play, the word that you hear a lot, and you hear this buzzword with coaches, especially head coaches all the time, is we're going to be really, really fundamental. Well, what does that mean? Like fundamental? My fundamentals aren't anywhere close to another team's fundamentals. I gave it an hour talk, and we didn't talk about stunts or anything like that. That was me talking an hour on us being fundamental. Like that was our fundamentals. When I talk about fundamental, there's a lot to that. Whereas another team, if you're a one gap slant angle team and all you do is move every snap, your fundamentals might be a little simpler. I don't think our fundamentals, we're trying to 2 gap and gap and a half and we're reading blocks and all that jazz. I think fundamentals are a really big thing when it comes to D-line play. And for us, fundamentals is pretty complicated. Now, on the flip side of that, when it comes to moving, we don't try to overcomplicate moving, right? We try to put all of our stuff into a bucket as a D-line. So we have our base technique, our movement our movement bucket, and then obviously our pass rush jet mode bucket. As far as stunts and having a lot in, I think a quote from Patrick Toney that I heard at a clinic: "Be your best position coach." Now, I'm not saying I'm my best position coach now. I tell my guys all the time, I want you to try and be better than I am, and I think I'm a better coach than you, and I want you to try and be a better coach than me in that kind of competitive environment. But I think you as a coordinator, you should try to be your best position coach. So I'm not a D-line guy by trade. I'm actually a linebacker guy by trade. It's what I played growing up. It's what I love. It's what I did my first year because I was comfortable. I learned pretty fast that, high school football is really, really difficult when you can't stop the run, especially when you're D-line, are just running upfield like most high school defensive linemen like to do. So I changed to doing the D-line and learn it that way, learn it the hard way. So we have a lot of fronts. We have a lot of stunts. I think we have like 12 to 15 unique fronts that we'll get into in the course of a year, and something like 30 tags when it comes to movements up front, something like that. So, I can do all that for one reason. I'm the one that's doing it. I'm installing it, so I know when I compare back. I also tell my group, you guys are a direct reflection of me, to the staff, to the program. You guys are my group, so I'm going to talk to you different, and I'm going to, kind of expect different things out of you compared to other groups, just because, like I said, you're a direct reflection to the team of me as a coach. Absolutely. There's a couple of different things to that. One, we get started about 2 months early compared to spring ball. So we'll start, doing some workouts, 2 or 3 days a week. Well, we'll start talking scheme and we'll start talking stunts. So when we get to day one, it'll drive our offensive coordinators crazy. Day one, when we get to it in May and spring, I'll have 10 different fronts and I'll have 20 different stunts, and I'm going to run them all, just kind of being completely frank. But, that's extra work that we put in, because I think, once again, we're going to do a lot. So, at some point you have to bite the bullet, and it takes work. So that's one part of it. The other thing is I force all of our D linemen to do some sort of post practice. Now I do that with them the first 5 days, and then I let the seniors run it. That's something that we've done everywhere. It's a pain in the butt because, if you play a long 15-game season, the kids are tired of going out and staying extra 10 to 15 minutes when everyone else is going in, and it's really cold at that point. And they just want to go inside, and you're just like, no, go do your post practice. So there's an amount of work that, that you can't hide from. I think, there's a good balance there. And Kenny talked about that a little bit on the cruise of, overworking. I think the biggest thing is efficiency. What does that look like for you and your kids? But early on, especially like for your first year in a program, it just takes a lot of work. So circling back to having a lot of stunts, on our base defense, and Kenny knows this, we don't like moving. We try to be really static. We like to play blocks really thick. When I think about our base defense, I think about, football is either a horizontal or vertical game. So, offenses, Dan, this year, either trying to stretch the field horizontally. So, a lot of people did the Braille system. We got wide splits and all that jazz, trying to take up the whole field. Formation of the boundary is another way to stretch people horizontally, and people are always trying to stretch people vertically when it comes to, shots or choice or things like that. We try to do that on defense as well. So a movement team will probably be a vertical defense. We're I think of it as a horizontal defense. A lot of people think on base that we're not moving. We are moving. If you actually watch it post snap, the movement is just horizontal. I'm trying to stretch everything horizontal. I'm trying to use that 12th man, that sideline. So that's kind of our base defense. Now, obviously, if you're overmatched, you have to at some point get vertical, make negative plays, create negative plays. And if you're outmatched, you have to, kind of take some chances. So you have to build a toolbox for that as well.
Yeah, that. Kenny, I think, is the one that actually kind of told me this when we started this podcast a year and a half ago, whatever. And that was the two different methodologies. You're either a insert base and get really good before you add anything, or you're I'm going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at these kids and then trim by the time we go to game one what isn't working. So I appreciate seeing someone who does it that way, and being obviously you're very successful with it. So it's good, because I got stuck my first year as a DC, which I'd technically have been a DC every year, but the first year I really got to install was like I was afraid to go to the next level. And then it felt like for 10 weeks you're installing. You know what I mean? You're just never quit installing because you're trying to get that next little gadget in or that next thing. And maybe you needed that answer in week 2, not in week 10. So I think that's a really great way to do it. All right, Kenny, he's got the punch. You get the counter punch here.
Oh, yeah. No, and I got to hear Tyler talk, and all this stuff is good stuff. As an offensive coach, here's kind of how we look at it. So if we were breaking down Tyler or anybody, we would break down from the D-line and move. So we're going to do D-line and linebackers here. And you kind of heard him talk. He's different. I've got to hear him talk D-line for about an hour, and he's different. Most defensive lines, we put them in one of two buckets. You're a movement-based team. You're trying to stunt and move and get penetration. So get vertical, get upfield, cause chaos. Or, like Tyler kind of mentioned, his team, for the most part, we would scheme for them to be what would be a technique-based team. They're trying to two-gap, or they're trying to play, A-gap with long arms, and they're not coming upfield. And, and you're not usually – those teams usually aren't going to cause a lot of movement. You don't really get a lot of head-up alignment with those teams unless they're trying to two-gap. With those teams, we put them into like a playing on the heel line. We're going to – play technique. And so we're going to attack those two teams in two different ways. The teams that are trying to shoot upfield and cause penetration, we're probably going to squeeze our splits. Probably going to do a whole lot of block down, kick out, against those teams, because that's going to, take their technique and use it against them. You see that a lot in the NFL. Like, I'm a Dolphin fan, and our defensive line is not this way, but we play other defensive lines that are shooting upfield, and Miami runs a ton of like whams and traps and different things to let that guy come upfield, kick him out, and go underneath him. So that's kind of what we're going to do to upfield, playing the screen games big against those teams. Again, we're going to shrink our splits down to not create space for them to shoot gaps. And then we're going to change the way we down block. We're going to down block those teams a little bit different than we were going to down block a team that's not doing that. Then you flip it. So if I'm playing Tyler, who I would say, and I know he does both, but I would say he majors in technique. So we're going to play him different. We're going to use influence blocks against him. The Dolphins Miami Dolphins are a big team on where they're reading blocks. So we're going to give you the down block look, and then we're going to run the naked boot. We're going to get on the edges against you guys. We're going to influence pull to get your guys to kind of go down the heel line with. We're going to change the way that we down block. Now we're going to step more vertically, because you're not stepping vertically. You're stepping, like Tyler said, horizontally. So you got to have that counter punch option in there. So that's how we would look at your defensive line. Then we would look at your linebackers. How are they? What are they doing? How are they fitting? Again, we're going to put you in basically two buckets. Are you basically playing spill? A lot of teams will take their linebackers, they're trying to spill everything, and those guys are playing over the top. Like, they're playing over the top, they're scraping over the top to C gap or D gap or whatever. Or are they looking for daylight, and you've given them the freedom to shoot it, and they're coming underneath, they're stunting, they're taking they're taking risks. So we're going to look at how those guys fit, and then we're going to run our RPOs, and we're going to run our, how we're going to handle our double teams, all that kind of stuff off of how they're fitting. If they are trying to run scrape and they're flying to where they're going, then we know we're probably going to have a chance to run some RPO game. We're probably going to RPO the linebacker more than the D lineman. If we're playing a team that's getting that they're kind of shooting gaps and we don't really know where they're going, now we may have to play them a little bit differently. We're going to account for them a little, again, squeezing our splits a little bit, handle them differently. So to me, we're going to try to bucket you as simply as we can. Like which defense are you running? Because I do believe this, because I believe this on offense too. I think you can be great at one thing and okay at something else. I don't think you can be great at two or three or four things when it comes to fundamentals. Like I think you need to major in this and minor in that. So for offense, major in gap scheme, and maybe you can minor in zone, or the other way around. But if you try to major in both, we think you're going to be bad at both. So that's kind of how we would game plan somebody is what are they really good at, and that's what we're going to game plan them in. So I don't know if that's what you're wanting, Daniel, but that gives you kind of a counterpoint to it.
That's a really good point. And you said buckets, which is what I love, right? You put them into buckets. So my next question then has to be, when a coach like Tyler comes along and has all of this stuff,
multiple,
does that then force your hand into being more multiple? Because now maybe you can't bucket it. You can't go out and practice against one front all week. So how does his methodology then kind of tweak what you really want to do?
I think it'll come down to the coach, because the whole point of this podcast right here is, can you be simple or do you need to be multiple? And the argument, the chicken or the egg argument, is always going to be, is Tyler good at both? Like that's what we're looking at. When I'm watching film, is he good at both techniques? If he is, that's a big problem, because now they're going to be able to show different fronts and different looks and different techniques. And that is a little tougher as a play caller for sure when a team can be multiple. In my experience, there are not as many defensive coordinators as good as Tyler. So usually the guys that are doing a lot of things aren't doing any of them well. So that would be kind of the counter argument we would have there. Now, if you're good at both, man, that does make it tougher. 100% makes it tougher. But to get good at both, we think you're going to be better at one than the other. And we would spend most of our time preparing for what would give us the most fear going into it.
Awesome. So, Tyler, I'm going to come back to you here. And I know we're kind of talking fronts and backers and stunts and all this, but with what Kenny said, how do you prevent from being bad at both? How do you get in? Is there a way that you get to tie your fundamentals to everything? Like I know offensively, my tag system allows me to just run gap down backer, or we're going to zone reach a guy. I mean, that's the two things my O-line really has to get good at, right? Pull kick, of course, but I can tie that to 1,000 tags. How do you keep the fundamentals simple so your guys are indeed good at both?
Yeah. I think there's a couple different things there. One thing, we do try to layer techniques. That's the biggest thing. So we don't wrong arm when we split the ball. Reason why is we dent the ball. It layers into how we play our base technique when we're head up. It's essentially the same exact technique. So where can I take techniques and where can I insert them into other calls and other concepts and things like that? That's always important. I think there's also two things they're talking about, fronts and also just kind of overall play. As far as fronts, I believe on defense that you should probably make the hardest thing in the game the simplest thing in the game for your kids. So what is that at the high school level? A lot of times that's fit in the run, because, we're going to see you play an offense, you're going to see probably 5 or 6 different run concepts, and the ball just never hits exactly where it's always supposed to hit if you watch tape. It's a messy game, so run fits are really, really difficult. So for us, I learned this one the hard way. My first year, they gave up 48 points per game. I gave up 30 points per game my first year being a defensive coordinator. Was it better than it had been in the past? Yes. But was it still awful? Absolutely. Reason why is we tried fitting the run a bunch of different ways. For the Aranda system, there was multiple different ways to fit the run, and it was kind of based off the front. So if you were playing a tight front mechanic, you were going to play, quote unquote 7-man spacing. You were going to play slow overlap. You were going to play horizontal. If you were playing under front, which was the exact same thing as slide, you get the same exact presentation, but the front and the coverage are different. So the fit's different. you're playing, lever, spool lever, you're trying to run through gaps and things like that. I tried doing all of that, and it was horrible. We were horrible at all of it. So going into Tyner, that was the big, kind of source of like, how do I fit the run? How do I make this easy? And it came down to just kind of getting lucky and talking to guys at Georgia Tech and Patrick Tony. I was blessed to sit in and I talked with them and ask some questions and things like that. And I figured out, they weren't fitting the run the multiple ways. They said, even at the college level, we don't want to fit the run multiple ways. It's too difficult. Well, I was like, shoot, if Patrick Tony at Florida can't do it, then I definitely can't do it at SOCA with me, myself, and I, and 25 kids who, are worried about an English test in the afternoon and things like that. Right. So for us, it simplified down to like trying to fit the run the same way. So we only play spill overlap. We only play stack track fallback, regardless of the front, regardless of the coverage. That's the only thing that we're going to do. It doesn't matter if we're in an even or an odd box. So if we're 4-2 or if we're 4-3, we're still going to play spill overlap. So we make that part simple. That part is very simple. Now, obviously, you can't play that way the entire game. You have to get vertical at some point, and that comes into, pressures and stunts and things like that. There, like I said, there's a back and forth of this. I would say we're very simple when it comes to fitting the run, which isn't what everyone does. And I get that, but I think that's kind of a, base philosophy thing for me, is doing that part really, really simple. Kind of on the flip side of this, talking about, movements, this is kind of a tip to offensive coordinators. And this might just be me because I suck at, I think the worst part of my game is calling games, honestly, and calling pressures and movements. When we're moving, we're guessing. No, it's a calculated guess, and it's based off of tendencies and homework that we do, and based off of what you guys give us, when we go to the tape and we break down the numbers. But at the end of the day, it's a guess. There's almost never 100% tendency. Sometimes there is, and, we can kind of really take advantage of that. But a lot of times, it's like a 60 to 70% of the time you're doing something. So when I'm pressuring, like just to give an example, a lot of times we see we get a three-man service with a running back to the three-man service. We're thinking duo that week, right? 75% of the time. Well, if you run outside zone away to the two-man service, and we got this against Beard, that always used to keep me up at night, because a lot of times I'm going to pressure right on top. I'm going to try to build a wall to that three-man service. So I'm going to plug, I'm going to cross dog, I'm doing something to that three-man service. I'm bringing the overhang. I'm doing something. Well, if you run wide zone the opposite way, it's going to be a big play. So part of that is, guys, like, we're kind of playing a cat and mouse game. So if you as an offensive coordinator can just kind of do your self-scout, and 90% of the time, and Maryville's really, really good at this, a lot of times they break tendencies during big games. So you go into a game, 90% of the time, backs to the three-man surface, we run duo. Well, this week, let's do something completely different. Let's run counter out of it. Let's run buck week or something like that. That's a really big part, because that'll throw me for a loop. And a lot of times, if I get into a game and I don't know where the ball's going to hit, because you're doing a bunch of things to break tendency, I'm going to play base defense. I'm going to hope and pray that my kids can just figure it out on themselves, and they can kind of make me right.
The big thing I want to mention about this, Daniel, for the offensive guys is, here's what we get in trouble with. As we go on a whiteboard and I want to draw up all Tyler's fronts. And if I do that, I'm going to be there all night. It's like when I make Tyler print off my huddle report and there's a million formations. I think defenses do the same thing with presentation of fronts. Man, don't waste your time on that stuff unless you can manipulate them. Like, if I can manipulate you into a certain look, that's worth it. But we're going to spend 90% of our time focused on the technique that you're playing with. And he brought that up. He did a great job explaining it. They're only fitting the run a certain way. They can present it differently, but essentially this is how they're going to fit you and how they're going to play you and what their technique is going to be. And I think as an offensive coordinator, when I started understanding that, instead of spending, because I would spend hours upon hours trying to manipulate Tyler into a certain formation and have this certain play that was going to be a touchdown. And then Tyler, dadgummit, didn't line up that way. So we had wasted how much time doing that. Instead, now we work every week against a 3-front on Tuesday, a 4-front on Wednesday, and we work the technique you're going to play, on both those fronts. And now we've gotten a whole lot better, because now we're prepared for whatever is going to walk through the door, instead of spending time trying to manipulate him.
I want to push on to the coverages here, just so I realize we could talk for a long time. But since we're kind of getting that defensive coverage, so once again, comparing it back to what I do, this is where we get chaotic. This is where the tags start flying, and my athletes can go out and be all over the place while my front is very, very simple on offense. So defensively, Tyler, I kind of want to hear, how do you pair those? I know you said they're disassociated, which is great. I think that's how defenses should be ran. So how are you able to make that, less simple, be more confusing to a young quarterback or an OC who maybe doesn't have all the answers yet? And how much stuff are you really getting installed in the back end?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of been a year-to-year thing. Honestly, like I said, I'm a box guy. I'm a linebacker, D-line guy. I'm not a DB guy. So when I hire DB guys, a lot of times, that's the first thing I tell them is like, I'm not a DB guy. I'm not going to tell you to T-step or bicycle step or start on your back or start facing the sideline or start facing the scoreboard. I don't really care. Let's just we're going to try and fit these concepts. These are the concepts that I believe in that just fit what we do. And we're going to kind of go from there, and you can kind of put in what you want. Now, this past year, I was telling our guys, like, I personally we have to get more multiple on the back end. Traditionally, we're just a press quarters, 4-mix mess team, right? So that's max fits, 9-man spacing. It's essentially cover zero, but it's from a 2-high shell. It's quarters, which quarters is kind of, just technically cover zero when it comes to it, comes down to it. Why do we do it that way? It's good into the run. I can also pressure off of it. So I don't have to run a blitz coverage. I don't have to install fire zone coverage if I want to bring a 5 or 6-man pressure. I can just run essentially cover zero. So that was kind of our thought process. From there, I think the biggest thing, thinking about it going into this year, we're going to start in that 4-mix mess world. I think I just sent a tweet out yesterday about this. Inside of mess, there's man except shallow, right? That technique fits into a lot of different coverages. Obviously, that's a coverage in itself, but also in 3x1, if you're playing rip Liz and you're the boundary corner and you're 1-on-1, that turns into mess. So that's cover 3. If you're playing rip Liz match and you're the overhang, and you're playing match carry deliver, you can play mess on 2 and cover 3. Right. And that's all from, our quarters base install. So try to, like I said, layer that way, try and steal techniques from there. We're going to get into split field tools, which again is also going to add into what, our full field tools. So day 2 install, we'll install cloud to the field. So we'll run mess to the boundary. We'll run cloud to the field, which is, cover 6-ish. Why do we do that? Because when we want to play Tampa, we want to play 2-trap. The kids already know cloud. So now we tell the kids, look, the safety, you safeties and corners, you already know cloud. Now we're just doing it to both sides. And we're just going to, we're not going to match routes. We're not going to match motions or anything like that. We're just going to play this full field concept. So they already know that. That's a really easy install when we go from cloud to 2-trap full field concept. From there, we get into like some 3/2 concepts, playing mod or, this past year we played spot drop, like true quarters. Like, we're all going to be in 4 cylinders and we're just going to run vertical and pass off routes, which is probably not what a lot of people do. But we try to, like I said, we did try to keep that concept kind of simple instead of playing a bunch of different match coverage. And like, I was a Palms guy when I first came into, coaching. Right. And I got burnt with it a ton. So, it drives my co-DC all the time. Why don't we just run Palms? Well, because I've been burnt too many times with it. Part of that is also what your kids can do. So at SFCA, both of our corners were 5'5", 150 pounds and ran 6 flat, 40s. Like they were awful. I didn't want those guys taking on, and Florida's really crazy because at private school level, one week you'll have those 5'5" corners, and the next week you'll be playing. We played Miles Graham. His dad's Ernest Graham. He's at University of Florida, playing middle linebacker right now. So you have that 5'5" corner 1-on-1. I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with that. Whereas at Cleveland, we had some cats on the back end, so you can kind of play 1-on-1 and do this. So everything layers into what you have, what you can do, what you can't do. What's your DB coach? What can he do? If you're a guy and your only other coach, the DB coach, is a cover 3 guy, and he's always taught us cover 3 for 40 years. He's probably really, really good at that. What can you do to have that insert into your overall system? Because there's ways to do it. You can still max fit from cover 3 if you bring that post safety down and he plays in the box and you play cheat technique. So there's things that you can do to kind of help yourself out as a coordinator, depending on what your staff can do and what your kids can do. But to be frank, we're not super, super multiple. Honestly, the way the game's going, if I had to guess, most offensive coordinators nowadays at the high school level they're getting some type of like tight match coverage. They're getting match quarters a lot of times. That's what a lot of guys are running. Shout out to Cody Alexander. A lot of teams are going to get that, at least at our level, at least in Tennessee. It's going to be, a lot of what we base out of match quarters. So I think from the flip side of that, just like offensive guys are now going into 12 personnel and adding tight ends and things like that, I love spot drop coverage now. We ran more spot drop coverage last year than we had ever before. And honestly, it was our best games when we ran a lot of it. So I love visioning the quarterback, getting to a landmark like old school Pee Wee football, cover 3, cover 2, and, spying looking at the quarterback and then, dropping hard on routes and things like that. So as far as being really, really multiple in the back end, I think the biggest thing is giving different presentations. You have to carry middle of the field open and middle of the field close coverage. That's something that you're going to have to do, because if you don't, you play cover 3 every snap, but you're going to get someone who's going to run forwards 18 times. You're going to get that. If you're a quarters guy, you're going to get Mills concept 18 different times, and they're going to find a way to get to the middle of the field. So, yeah, layering it is the biggest thing. But as far as having 18 different match concepts, it's not something that I do. It's also, I don't coach in Texas or Florida anymore. As far as drop back pass game, it's just not super, super prevalent where we're at. So, it'd be very different if I was playing, in Texas and I was Coach Harvey and I saw predominantly, 4 open, a bunch of different passing concepts. So, where are you at? I think that's a big piece of the puzzle.
That's you brought up a big point there. I think there's levels to this even for us high school coaches. We have to understand where we are. We open the podcast talking, who do I have to beat? Right. And it's funny because Kenny says that all the time. And then Tyler, you jump on here on a random show and you talk about it too. But you also have to know where you are, right? And if you are trying to go out and put in these 3, 4, 5 different match coverages, but the same kid you're teaching it to has to learn 30 tags on offense, and he's playing 2 positions over there because we just don't have kids, and he's an Iron Man. He never comes off the field. You probably ought not put all that stuff in anyway, right? So you still have to keep all of this in perspective, whether you're a kiss or a kill guy. It better make sense to where your program is. I don't think you're going out and installing Rip Liz and all this stuff if you are 0-10 or 2-8, 1-9, whatever, trying to recover a program, find their identity. It probably isn't all of this multiple chaos. Maybe it is. I don't know. And maybe you can find the magic wand that makes it work. All right, Kenny. So he talks about, weirdly enough, here we are. We're going to kind of flip roles. He talks about being fairly simple in coverage. So how do you? We're kind of arguing the same point here. So how do you?
Say bucket. It's buckets.
How do you counterpunch that?
It's buckets. I'm going to look at Tyler and we're going to put him in a bucket. Is he going to play zone, or is he going to play man, or is he going to be multiple? And I kind of look at it the same way I look at fronts. If he's multiple in coverages, usually that means that, we're going to be able to expose that pretty quickly by using either tempo, formation, shifts, and motions. And so if you've watched us play, and most high school coaches are kind of going to this, even our 10 personnel brothers, are trying to go to split a running back out wide and bring him back in the backfield. I'm watching games with my 12-year-old son, and he goes, "Why do the Dolphins always do this?" And I said, "Because Tua needs to know the coverage before the play is snapped. That's why he's out there. We're not going to throw the ball to our fullback out there one-on-one the corner, but now we know they're in zone. But if all of a sudden a linebacker goes out there, we know they're in man." So as an offensive coordinator, you've got to have ways to identify these multiple teams. So if they are multiple, how are you identifying it before the snap? Because these are young kids, and if I can identify to him where to throw it before the ball is snapped, our odds are going to go up. If you are a simple team, and Tyler mentioned it, if we know you're in palms, if we know you're in cover 2, if we know every time we go trips, you're running man on the backside, we're going to attack that. So I guess I get to argue you need to be multiple enough on defense. For me, it's always been about, do you have checks you can get into? Like for us on defense, we have 2 or 3 checks we feel comfortable with against trips. We have 2 or 3 checks we feel comfortable with against empty. 2 or 3 checks we feel comfortable with, against tight end nub, where it's trips and a tight end over there, where we can give you enough different, but it's coming out of the base coverages we've been in. And Tyler hit on the nail on the head is you can't be real exotic in coverages, because that's the way the offense really can attack you. The way I'm seeing the game go is a lot of teams are getting more exotic in their passing game, and they're getting less exotic in their running game. That's what I'm seeing. from your teams you have to beat in Arkansas. We're in different places. But in Arkansas, if you want to win a state championship, the team that won it this year was 2x2 spread. They ran inside zone and GT. That was it. But they ran 30 different concepts in the pass game. And so, that's what we've got to beat if we want to wear a ring. So for us, we got to have enough tools back there in the back end, but not too many, because it's fun to, like Tyler said, you call this, and this, and all of a sudden they shift to trips. That coverage doesn't work real well against trips. So you need, in my mind, be really good at those things. But as an offense, that's kind of how we're looking to attack. Tyler's going to stay in quarters. We're about to throw dig post. I mean, that's just, that's what we're going to throw. We're going to throw go 15-yard out, because that's how you beat quarters. That's how you beat whatever they're going to be in. So you got to be multiple enough. The last thing I would say on this as a defense is, don't think you have to always disguise and leave yourself susceptible to the run game. Because I see this a lot at the higher levels, like in the NFL level even, where I can't remember who it was trying to run the clock out. It might have been Washington. Washington's got Jaden Daniels going to run the ball. They're getting in trips. They're running literally our stuff. They're running buck sweep and then running bunch trips. And so I'm watching them going, okay, this is kind of fun. I'm watching like a high school offense. And Detroit is running a safety high. Like, they're not going to throw it. So what are you disguising right here? Like, what are you doing? Like, you have to be able at some point to say, we're going to stop what you do and fit everything. And in my end, you mentioned in the front end, I would almost work, like for me, I would work from the back end forward building our defense. Like, I would work on, these are our base coverages, and then I can be exotic with my fronts. Then I can be exotic with my fronts, because you get into these games where now, and Tyler, I don't envy you guys on defense. It's really hard to get the numbers right because there's so many running quarterbacks. Because how does that affect your coverage? We did the same thing Tyler did. We were seeing so many teams where their quarterback was scaring us more than the guys he was throwing the ball to, that we went to spot dropping, because we don't want our eyes off the quarterback, because he scares us more than him throwing curl routes. So I think you got to kind of have the ability to do both of those things. I know I kind of argued being multiple there, but to me, I think you got to have enough, but you can't have too much where you suck at what you're doing.
I love that you argued being multiple, because once again, this is how podcasting works. But, we just talked about how he wants to be multiple in the front end, and you can just put it in two buckets and be simple. But you guys are both arguing both sides. Like, it does take, it takes some of every type. You've got to be able to do some things very simply and just be fundamentally sound. And you've got to be able to bring the chaos, increase the pressure, make kids think on the fly in other spots. It's going to take us to our last point here, guys. And we don't have to be here a long time, but what position groups or are there different position groups that you think you can overload with more stuff? And then some that you're like, hey, I just need to leave them alone and let them be very sound. And kind of on either side of the ball. Tyler, we'll let you go first here.
Yeah, I think first thing, it's kind of funny. Like, this podcast is a perfect encapsulation of coaching, into where we didn't plan on flipping and me talking about being simple and he talking about being complicated. A lot of times that's just coaching. Like, that is just coaching. A lot of times I sit back and I'm like, is anything that we talk about, is it even important? Because I've been at two places. At Tyner, when we won the state championship, we didn't practice on Mondays because it was just the way the schedule and the staff worked out. We didn't even practice on Mondays, and we only Zoom it on Sundays. So, like, as far as workload, we had the easiest workload probably in America, won a state championship. Cleveland, we're there 10 hours a day, Saturday, Sunday, we're there after practice, before practice, and we were pretty good there too. So, like, a lot of this, it matters, but at the end of the day, like, it just comes down to your kids. Like, a lot of times it just comes down to, small culture things, and it comes down to leadership and small things like that. So I just thought that was funny. I think it's a perfect encapsulation of, coaching. I thought that was funny.
100%.
As far as positions, I'll kind of just circle back to, I think it really just comes down to, like, again, you being your best position coach. If you're the coordinator, whatever you think is the most important thing, if you're Adam Harvey and you're in Texas and, you're getting a bunch of spread pass game, then be the DB coach and be the best DB coach in America, or, work that way. If you're me and, you see a bunch of different run game, multiple different run game, and you're going to get into the playoffs and teams are going to try to run the ball down your throat, then coach the D line. I don't think it necessarily is a comfort thing. I think you can learn different positions. I think there's enough information out there nowadays that you can learn a position, be pretty good at it, and coach it that way. So I would kind of, a lot of times people just like to coach whatever they're comfortable with, whatever they played. A lot of times in high school or college is what they just coach. I kind of push back against that a little bit. I think you can learn other positions. There's enough information out there nowadays. So I think if anything, if you want to be a good coordinator, you should at some point you're going to get forced to coach every position. That's just going to be the way coaching is. I've had to coach my first year, like I said, coach linebackers. I coached D-line out of necessity. This past year, I really coached safeties because I had a D-line guy, and the D-line was good enough to where I could kind of just let them off the leash and they were going to be fine. And I had 4 new DBs, and I had to get that figured out. So I really coached safeties. And, Kenny knows this, coaching a long enough time, you're going to end up coaching every position. It just is. It's going to be that way, whether you plan it or not. So you might as well just prepare for it anyways. And whatever position you coach, I think whether you're a position coach or a coordinator, I think if you're good enough, you can kind of bang the table to do enough. And if you're a position coach, hopefully you've earned the trust of your coordinator to where if you say, hey, we can handle more, he trusts you that you can handle more. So I think there's kind of both sides to that.
That's a great answer, Coach. It is always Jimmy's and Joe's. So it's exactly what you opened up with there, right there. It's so funny because we can flip-flop. Our philosophy is I don't think any of us are just like, hey, throw chaos and never stop adding. And I don't think any of us are just like, hey, we're going to be vanilla and do one thing forever. Like, we're all somewhere in the middle. So it's great. Kenny, same to you. Is there a position you feel like can just handle a whole lot more? Is there a way that you're keeping some kids more simple? Or is it literally by each kid instead of position group?
Yeah, I do want to kind of echo something Tyler said. Like, if you're going to be a coordinator or if you want to be a head coach one day, you better be able to coach every spot. Because here's what's going to happen to you. You're going to go hire a coach. And if you advertise, I need an O-line coach, your pool of candidates is going to be way smaller than if you just say, I need an offensive coach. And now I can hire the best guy because I myself can go coach whatever. Same thing as a head coach. Like, I want to be able, when I advertise for coaches, unless it's a coordinator, I just advertise for a coach. We will find the best coach, and I'll move the pieces around, including myself, so that we can have the best staff. If that means we have 3 O-line coaches and one of them has to coach receivers one year, that's what we're going to do. So I want to echo that point. Second thing that I would say is, Tyler mentioned the coaches. That does matter for sure. Like, don't coach what you don't know. So, that they'll be limited on your staff. Like, what can those guys handle? But I would say it's much more personnel driven. Like this year for us, defensively, we ended up going 13-1, had a really good year. Well, my son was on the team, and the defensive coordinator would make him meet after practice and before practice. And he was basically the coach on the field at safety. So he was the one that had a lot of things. Like, we used him to make all our adjustments. There were times he called the front end and the back end because he could handle that stuff. And so he became our strong safety, but he would be the one that would dictate who rolled to coverage, or if we were sitting too high, or if he was coming and we were sending someone off the edge. And so he had a lot on his plate. And then he had a junior inside linebacker, really intelligent kid that kind of handled a lot of the fronts because those 2 kids mentally could handle more. Offensively, we had a sophomore quarterback, so we didn't put as much on his plate early. But as he matured, we added more to him. And then we have one lineman who's been around for a bit. He had a lot on his plate. We would move him sides of the ball. We'd bring him as a tight end over. We would do a lot of pulling with him. So I think it's all personnel driven. Like, I think 1 year it might be that your linebackers have a lot on them because that's what you've got. 1 year is D-line. 1 year it's – but I don't think you want to pigeonhole yourself into saying – our quarterback's always got to be smart because and smart can be very different. Smart can be, there's different types of smart, but I don't think you want to pigeonhole yourself into saying if you're going to play quarterback, you got to check these boxes, or if you're going to play running back, you got to check these boxes. I think you better put the best kid there and then adjust your scheme based off of them. I think that you're going to be a lot more successful doing it that way.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, guys, I appreciate it. I think we've gotten a good compare and contrast here of 2 different ways in it. And once again, I think it all comes back to we're doing things the exact same way. It's just who do you got in the locker room, right? You can't go complex if you don't have the kids to do it. And if you're super simple all the time, you're going to waste some talent. So I think that there's you can go either way there. So let's jump to our last part here and what not to do as a coach. And get us with that, Kenny.
Yeah, I got a couple things on here. So the lesson for me is, be willing to learn from others. I think that's a big thing. I love having Tyler on here because I think he kind of epitomizes the up and coming generation of coaches. And then you've got guys on there that have been coaching for 40 years. And it's almost like we want to argue with each other instead of work with each other. Like there's so much value we can glean, from these older coaches who have been around and been through the, times we've never heard of before and actually mowed a field. There's those guys that have been around for a bit. And then there's these young guys like Tyler that, man, they're analytically unbelievable. And I think as a collective, cohesive group, we need to work together to learn from each other instead of that's the way you did it and that sucked. I'm doing a new way. Tyler's learned from guys before him. He mentioned it, guys that have been there. Now, older guys can watch these young guys take those things and make them even better. I think that's the big lesson in football is there's always something you can learn from somebody. But a lot of times, instead of we hear old coach say, keep it simple, stupid, you're doing too much. And we hear young coach say, you're too simple. The truth is in the middle, like you kind of heard today. The truth is always in the middle. So don't be so close-minded you shut out new ideas, or so open-minded, that you don't have a foundation of beliefs. I think there's always a middle ground there.
Yeah, I love it. Before we get out of here, I forgot the quote of the week. We got good conversation started. So give us our quote of the week, and mainly just because I want people to know where they can go get those things.
Oh, yeah. Man, I forgot about it. So quote of the week from Mike Royer. This is on dependability. It says, and this is his quote, I learned that, Mike, you get your first job on your ability and every other job on your dependability. I had a nice conversation with a couple of our underclassmen in my office yesterday, which is nice for saying they're in my office, the door shut. It wasn't super nice. We talked about what I call natural consequences. I went on a cruise. Tyler went on a cruise. I had 2 entrees and 3 desserts every night. Natural consequences. I'm a little fatter than I was before I went on the cruise. Talk to them about when you make certain decisions, consequences. And the number one thing that I see on kids that are sophomores and juniors that don't get on the field for us that should get on the field is dependability. Like we got to be able to count on you to be where you are, be where you're supposed to be, do what you're supposed to be doing. And I think the same thing with coaches. Like you want more responsibility as a coach, you got to be dependable with what you've had before so that guy trusts you. Tyler mentioned it. I would love to have open book for my coaches to be able to do whatever they want to do. And we do that with ours. They earned that. Like they didn't just come in first job and I said, hey, you have the D-line, have fun. They proved over time they're reliable and they're dependable. Then you get the chance to show off your ability. But you don't just get ability without dependability.
I love it. That's a great way to put that, Coach. All right, Tyler, man, we greatly appreciate you coming on the show. If you don't mind, tell us where people can reach out to have a conversation with you if they want to ask about your system or get a snapshot of that beautiful state championship ring, whatever it is. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, no, first, I appreciate you guys having me on here. And, I'll even go to say I'm not going to try to brown nose Kenny or anything like that. But I was honestly blown away. This is the first time I met Kenny was on that cruise. And a lot of times when you meet people and you only know their online persona, you just never know how it's going to go when you meet someone. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good. But no, really appreciate Kenny. And, honestly, this head coach talk was awesome. I was texting my head coach the entire time about some things that, he brought up. And, I think we think about the game similarly in a lot of different ways. As far as finding me, Twitter's always the easiest. I haven't announced it yet, but I am coming out with a pretty overarching clinic course that'll be on CoachTube and probably a personal website as well later on in the year. Help pay for baby diapers and wipes, lots of them as I've learned. So yeah, we'll do that later on, but Twitter's always the easiest way. Just DM me. My DMs are open. That's always the easiest way to reach me. But yeah, I appreciate it, guys.
Guys, I got the luxury of hearing Tyler do 2 sessions. Go pay money. He's got 2 kids under 14 months. Go buy his course. 1 is going to be really good. And 2, come on, guys. You got 2 kids under 14 months. You got to help the man out a little bit,
I love it. All right, gentlemen, we appreciate it. We thank all of you listening out there, Facebook, Twitter. If you're live, listen to us. If you're going back and listening to this onto the podcast sites, we appreciate you very much. Watching the growth this year has been a blessing. We just really neat to see. When I got into football, not every room has this environment where you can be wrong sometimes and you can learn, and we go out and we try new things. We're open-minded. That's not all of football. So we appreciate that you continue to show up to listen to us talk with that environment in mind, that football is not in concrete. Things can change. Kind of what we talk about in this episode. It's somewhere, truth is always in the middle. So I want to thank you for being a listener to the Coaching 101 podcast. We'll hope you join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you always know when the new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.